The first thing I heard was not a roar, not a cry, not even a footstep. It was the soft knocking of antlers against my window. 3 slow taps in the dark, as if something outside wanted to be let in. I did not move at first. I lay there under 2 heavy blankets, listening to the stove click as it cooled, to the wind whirring at the corners of the lodge, to my own breath going thin and shallow in the cold. I told myself it was only a stag come too close to the wall, rubbing its rack against the stone the way they sometimes did in the hard months. But then it came again. 3 taps. Slow. Careful. Not low to the ground where a deer might stand, but level with my face where I lay in bed. That was the moment I understood that whatever had come to the window was standing upright. I loved that country before it frightened me. In the early mornings, the frost would shine over the bent grass like sugar on dark bread, and the locks would lie flat and black as polished stone. Red deer moved through the mist like thoughts you nearly had but lost. Grouse burst from the heather under your boots with a sound that could stop your heart and make you laugh right after. Even the silence had its own weight, and after a while you began to hear things inside it. Water under peat, wings over cloud, the small dry click of ice growing at the edge of a puddle. It was a hard place, yes, but it could be so beautiful it made your chest ache. I still remember the smell of wet wool steaming by the stove, of rabbit stew thick with barley, of peat smoke sunk into every coat we owned. I remember boots left by the door in a row all caked with black bog water. I remember the lamplight on tin cups. I remember one of the older keepers singing low through his nose while he sharpened a blade. It was not much of a life by rich men's measure, but it was a good one if you liked your food hot, your bed dry, and your work honest. And for a little while, before the knocking started, I was happy. Then the deer started coming in too close. Not all at once. Not in a way that would make a man drop his cup and run. Just little things. A hind standing in open ground at noon, staring toward the keeper's house instead of grazing. A stag found by the burn with both ears laid flat and the whites of its eyes showing, though there was no dog near it and no scent of men in the air. Tracks circling the kennels in the night, deer tracks, dozens of them, pressed so tight together it looked as if the herd had paced for hours in the dark. We joked that the beasts wanted in from the weather. Yet the weather was clear. What we found there was not what any of us expected. It began with the dogs. A keeper's dog knows the hill better than most men. It will go where told, stop when called, and face things that would send a person backwards down a slope on hands and knees. Ours were good dogs, brave dogs, but one by one they began to balk at the west edge of the moor, where the ground softened and the old pines stood bent like tired men over the peat hags. They would whine, their tails would tuck. One old bitch, steady as stone in any weather, turned full around and bit through her own lead trying to get back to the track. The first carcass was a hind, half sunk in a patch of brown water. Her body twisted hard as if she had died running, and the ground had gripped her before she could fall. There was no clean kill on her, no throat torn the way a dog would do it, no belly opened by teeth. Only the back legs broken, both of them, and long strips of hide hanging loose from her flanks as neat as if they had been cut with shears. The meat beneath was not eaten. It had been worried. Pulled, tasted maybe then left. I should have left then. Every part of me knew it. But I stayed. The oldest of the keepers crouched by that dead hind with his cap off and his gray hair lifting in the wind. And I watched the lines in his face settle into something I had never seen there before. Not fear exactly. Men like him did not show fear in the common way. It was more like offense, as if the world had broken one of its old rules and done so on his hill where he had to look at it. He put 2 fingers to the flesh, rubbed them together, sniffed them, then wiped his hand hard on the heather. He said no dog did that. The second keeper laughed, though not with much joy, and said perhaps it was a poacher's trick. Perhaps boys from the village making mischief. Yet there were no boot marks, no wheel marks, no sign of rope or knife, and no reason any poacher would break the back legs and leave the flesh to spoil. The third keeper said nothing at all. He only stood with his gun tucked in the crook of his arm and looked west, toward that line of stunted pine in the darker ground beyond. After a long minute, he said he had heard calling there 2 nights before. Not fox calling, not owl, something between. Then the knocking came to my window. I did not shout. I did not leap from the bed. I only opened my eyes wide and stared at the dark square of glass gone silver with moonlight. And after a few heartbeats I saw it. Not a face, not clearly, but a shape that blocked the stars. Too narrow for a stag's head. Too still for any beast I knew. There was a smell under the door then. Wet and sour and old, like rotted reeds pulled from the bottom of a lock. I remember that smell better than anything. Even now, if rainwater sits too long in a ditch, I catch it again and my hands begin to shake. 3 taps. Then nothing. When I found the courage to move, I slid from the bed without a sound, took up the poker from beside the stove, and stood there in my shirt with my bare feet freezing on the boards, waiting for the next tap. It did not come. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time feels different when you are listening for something you do not want to hear. At last I edged toward the window and put my eye to the corner where the frost had not yet formed. There was nothing outside. The ground below the sill, however, was churned up as if several deer had milled there in panic, and in the center of that mess of slots and torn peat was one mark unlike the rest. Not a hoof, not a boot, just 4 long gouges pressed deep into the wet earth, with a 5th set farther back like a heel dragged sideways. It looked less like a print than the place where something had steadied itself before leaning close to my glass. I did not sleep again that night. He asked who had been outside my room. I told him nobody I had seen. He looked at the wall, at the height of the sill, at the clawed marks in the peat, and said he was glad of that. Then he called for the others. From there the matter stopped being one man's bad night and became everybody's trouble. We went over the ground with care. The deer slots were plain enough. A whole knot of them jammed close as if the herd had rushed the lodge in fear. Yet the strange marks did not come in from the open moor with the deer tracks. They began by the wall itself, just there, as if whatever made them had come over the stone without leaving any sign on the far side. They crossed a yard in uneven sets, dug deep near the woodpile, and vanished where the frost held hard under the back trees. Still, pride is a stubborn fuel. The estate had stock. The estate had deer. The estate had men whose job it was to protect both. By midday, the old keeper had decided the matter would be settled before dusk. We would take the west side together, 4 of us with guns, dogs, and enough lamp oil in our bags to see us back if the light failed early. We spoke plainly while we packed. We said wounded stag. We said big feral dog. We said maybe 2 dogs running together. We said anything but what sat in our thoughts like a stone. The moor keeps its own. By the time we reached the west edge, none of us was still pretending. We came to the old pines near the west edge by late afternoon, and there the ground changed under us. The heather thinned, the peat opened in black cuts. Water stood still in long, narrow pools that showed no ripple, though the wind had begun to rise. The trees were not many, perhaps 20 or 30 in all, but they leaned at odd angles, roots half bare from years of soft ground shifting under them, and their branches made a roof so tangled and dark that evening seemed to wait beneath them even while the sky beyond was still bright. The dogs would not enter. We dragged, we coaxed, we cursed. We tried every trick men use when they cannot admit a dog knows better. In the end, 2 sat down and shook, and the old bitch flattened herself so low her belly touched the wet moss. She gave a sound I had never heard from a dog before or since, a broken moan that rose at the end like she was trying to make words with a mouth not built for it. The 3rd keeper said we should turn back and come in the morning with more men. The old keeper said morning might be too late. Then we found the nest. I call it a nest because I have no better word, though even now that feels too gentle for what lay there, in a hollow where 3 pines bent together above a patch of open mud. Branches had been piled in a rough ring taller than my waist. Deer hide hung from the broken ends. Inside the ring were bones, not many but enough to show a pattern. Roe deer, hare, grouse, dog, and one thing that was not animal at all, a length of blue wool cloth caught on a branch, torn in a way that made the threads curl like tiny fingers. No one moved. The second keeper stepped closer first. He said the cloth might be from an old coat lost by a shepherd, and he said it too quickly, as if speed could make the lie stronger. The old keeper reached toward the cloth, then stopped. There were marks in the mud inside the ring. Not prints. Knees, hands, deep, repeated, as though something had crouched there over and over, rising, lowering, rising again. Beside them were the long gouges I had seen under my window. 4 in front, 1 behind. Not feet, not paws, something between. And there, half buried in the black muck at the bottom of the ring, was a human tooth. No man who sees a thing like that stays calm. The third keeper swore so hard his voice broke. I felt the skin on my neck draw tight. The second keeper backed away and struck a tree with his heel. The sound was small. Too small. Yet the woods answered. Not with an echo. With movement. A low stirring all around us, in brush, in branch, in mud, as if whatever had made that place had been lying still just beyond our sight and had now raised its head. The old keeper turned and whispered one word. Run. We did. The dogs heard it before we reached them. Their barking tore through the trees, wild and high. Branches whipped my face. Mud took my left boot nearly off. Someone crashed behind me. Someone else fired a shot that boomed so loud in that close wood my ears went dull at once. Then I was out among the pale grass again, and the sky looked huge and wrong above me, and the dogs were pulling at their leads, trying not to go west, but to break east with every bit of fear in them. I looked back once. I wish I had not. Something moved between the trunks where the light failed. Tall, then low, then tall again. Too quick to hope with the eye. I saw a shoulder, maybe. I saw what might have been antlers and might have been bent branches caught across its back. I saw 2 pale flashes where eyes should not have been because they were too far apart, almost at the sides of the head. And I saw one hand, if hand is the word, curl around a tree trunk and draw the thing sideways without a sound. Then the second keeper screamed. Not far behind us. Not ahead, right among us, though I had thought him beside my shoulder an instant before. I turned and saw him on his back in the heather with one leg folded under him wrong. There was blood on his mouth, though I had not heard another shot. He reached out toward me. I reached too. For one wild second I thought I had him. Something took him by the chest and dragged him backwards into a peat cut so fast the grass shut over him like water. He did not even have time to cry out again. We fired into the cut. Once, twice, 3 times the dogs went mad. The old keeper shouted for us to fall back or it would take us one by one. But the third keeper dropped to his knees at the edge and began clawing at the grass with his bare hands, calling down into the dark gap as if the man below might answer. I grabbed his coat and hauled with all my strength. He turned on me with such a face that I let go at once. Then from the cut came a sound so low I felt it in my teeth before I heard it clearly. Breathing, wet, close, patient. The old keeper fired both barrels into the hole. What rose from it was not a roar. It was worse. It was a cough almost human, thick with mud and blood, followed by a clatter of loose peat and a smell so foul the dogs began to choke. The old keeper did not wait to see more. He struck the third keeper across the side of the head with the butt of the gun, not hard enough to kill, only enough to stun him, and shouted for me to help drag him. So I did, one under each arm, guns banging against our hips, dogs screaming around us. The west side of the moor behind us suddenly full of the feeling that something had stepped out and was now matching us just beyond sight. That was the true beginning. Everything before it had only been warning. By dark we were back inside, doors barred and lamps burning. We heard it at the byre first. The old keeper whispered that if it got in, we were to put the barrels in its mouth or eye and not waste powder on the body. I asked him if bullets would stop it. He did not answer. Something brushed the wall under my window. Not once. Back and forth. Back and forth. A rough dragging sound like wet hide against stone. Then, very softly, 3 taps on the glass. The third keeper began praying. I had not known him for a praying man. Most of us were not, except in storms and at graves, yet there he sat with both hands over his ears, whispering words so fast they ran together, and the sound of him broke my heart more than the tapping did. Fear in a brave man always does. It shows you how small all of us really are. The tapping stopped. At first I thought it was the goat. Then it lifted its head. You know how the mind tries to save itself by naming things. Deer, dog, man, bear, though there were no bears there. My mind threw each one at the shape and each one fell away. It was too high in the shoulders, too long in the arms. The head seemed narrow and wet, with dark strands hanging from it that might have been reeds or hair or strips of skin. One leg bent like a hind leg. The other struck the ground almost straight, and slung over its back, limp as washing, was the body of the second keeper. He was still alive. I know because he raised one arm. The old keeper fired. The shot hit. I saw the thing twist, saw something dark burst from its side, and heard that coughing bark again. But it did not fall. It sprang, not away, but up, over the low wall at the edge of the yard with a power that made no sense for a wounded thing carrying the man's weight. For 1 second it was full in the moonlight, and I saw the skin on its chest pale and bare under strips of coarse dark hair. Then it was gone beyond the wall, taking him with it. The old keeper vaulted after it before I could stop him. We found blood on the wall. Blood on the frost-burned grass beyond. Blood leading in a broken line toward the byre and then out toward the moor. But no body, no beast. Only one of the second keeper's boots lying heel up in the rushes with the lace still tied. The old keeper picked it up and stared at it as if he no longer understood what a boot was for. Then from the bier came a cry, not the missing man. The third keeper. We had left him alone. We ran back too late. The front room was empty. The chair by the stove lay on its side. The whiskey bottle had broken underfoot. One shutter banged on its latch where the hook had been torn clean from the wood. There were bloody hand marks on the sill. His hand marks, I think. And on the floor beneath them a trail of black water and pine needles leading out into the yard. He had not gone by choice. The old keeper made a sound then that I have heard only once in my life, from a ewe that had lost both lambs in one night. It was not a man's sound anymore. It was the sound made when grief comes too fast for speech. He stood in the wreck of the room with the empty boot in one hand and the broken gun in the other, and looked older by 20 years than he had at supper. If you know that feeling, if you have ever sat in the dark with your whole life hanging on the hope that a lock will hold, then stay close with me now. And if you want, leave a word below and let me know what you think was outside that house, because I still do not have an answer that lets me sleep easy. There were just 2 of us left. We could have barred the place again and waited for dawn. We could have run east and prayed the beast had fed enough. We did neither. We took lamps. We took the spare shells. We took the long skinning knives from the hook by the dresser, and we followed the Blackwater trail out across the yard, through the broken gap in the back wall, and on to the moor where the frost shone under the moon like a field of small dead stars. The trail led west again. Of course it did. The moor keeps its own. It was the second keeper's hand, not the whole of him. Only the hand, cut clean at the wrist, palm up, as if begging. The old keeper did not speak. He lowered the lamp, stooped, and picked up the hand by the sleeve cuff with a care so gentle it nearly undid me. Then he laid it on the wall, just laid it there, straightened the fingers, and turned away. There was a sound from below us. I had thought the shieling floor was earth. It was not. When the old keeper stepped toward the center, the ground gave a little under his boot and answered with hollow space. We looked at each other once, then we shoved aside a slab of rotted timber and found a hole beneath, half filled with old branches and turf as if someone, or something, had tried to roof it over. The smell that rose from it was the same that had come under my door, only stronger now, thick enough to sting the eyes. The old keeper said the missing man might still be alive below. I knew he did not believe it. Still we climbed down. The third keeper was alive. Barely. He lay against the far wall with one leg trapped under a fallen beam, and his face so white it seemed made of candle wax. His eyes found us and widened. but when he tried to speak, only blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. We knelt beside him. He gripped my sleeve with a force that shocked me. Then he looked past us into the dark mouth of a side tunnel I had not seen before. He shook his head. No words, just that. The old keeper lifted the beam enough for me to drag him free. He cried out once, a sound so thin it hardly seemed human. I pulled him toward the ladder hole while the old keeper kept the lamp raised at the tunnel. It sloped away into deeper dark, narrow at first, then widening beyond the reach of the light. I thought I heard breathing from it. Then a scrape, then the soft knock of bone against stone, as if something inside had turned too quickly and struck the wall. The old keeper told me to get the wounded man out. I said I would not leave him. He told me again, "There are moments when you know the shape of the rest of your life." Mine was there, kneeling in muck with one dying man in my arms and another facing the tunnel with an empty gun. He was trying to reload by feel because his hands would no longer stop shaking. I wanted to disobey. I wanted to be brave in the clean storybook way where no one gets left. But real fear is heavier than that. Real fear counts breaths. Real fear knows one living man may be saved if two do not try to play at heroics. So I dragged the third keeper to the hole. He clawed at my coat. He tried to tell me not to go back. I went back anyway. The old keeper was gone from where I had left him. The lamp lay on its side in the muck, still burning low, and the tunnel beyond was empty except for black smears on the stone. Then from deep inside came a shot. One only. Then a choking cry cut short in the same instant, as if something had closed a wet hand over a mouth. I froze. Then I heard the old keeper's voice. He called my name. Softly, calmly. From the dark. For 1 weak, stupid second, I nearly answered. Then he called again, and I heard what fear had sharpened in me at last. The voice had his tone. It had his rough burr. It even had the catch he got in his throat when he was winded. But it did not have words placed right. The pause sat wrong. The breath came at the wrong moment. It was like hearing a song played on an instrument made from bones. I backed away. The voice came closer. Then another voice behind it. The second keeper's, begging. Then the third keeper's, though he was above me bleeding by the hole. All three from the same dark throat. I dropped the spare shells. I dropped the knife. I grabbed the fallen lamp and fled, half crawling, half stumbling through muck, so foul it splashed my face and filled my mouth. I do not say that with pride. I say it because it is true. At the lip of the hole I shoved the third keeper upward with all I had left, climbed after him, and kicked the timber slab back across just as something struck it from below hard enough to lift one side clear off the stones. I shoved it again. It hit once more, then stopped. The moor was silent. No wind, no deer call, no water, just moonlight and my own ragged breathing and the dying man at my feet trying to pull air into a body that had almost finished with pain. I hauled him into the shadow of the broken wall and held the lamp low. We waited. Nothing came through the roof. Nothing climbed the walls. Yet from somewhere under us, muffled by turf and stone, there came a slow dragging sound, moving in a circle, as if whatever lived below the shieling had begun to pace. The third keeper died before dawn. Not with last words. Stories lie about that. Most people do not leave you neat lines to remember. He only gripped my wrist hard, stared toward the west where the sky would one day lighten, and let go. I sat with him until the cold stiffened his fingers. The lamp died. Frost silvered the fallen grass. Once, just once, I heard 3 taps from under the earth. At first light, I walked east alone. I did not run. Running would have put its breath on my neck even if it never followed. I walked with the second keeper's blood dry on my sleeve and the third keeper's weight still on my bones, and every pool I passed looked like a mouth. Deer stood on ridges watching me go. A raven followed overhead a long while, croaking once every few minutes like a clock marking out a bad dream. When I reached the lodge, the broken door hung open. The goat lay in pieces by the byre, and my windows still held the faint grease marks of where something had leaned close in the night. No old keeper, no beast, no tunnel deep enough to hold the things I had seen. only bones in the muck, some animal, some not. And on the stone wall near the back, 4 long marks over one shorter groove, pressed so hard into the slime that bits of grit still sat in them days later. I left that country soon after. That is what makes the rest hurt. Over the years I have tried to explain it away. A pack of feral dogs and fear doing the rest. A wounded giant stag seen badly in poor light. A man living wild on the moor who learned to feed like a beast. A sinkhole. A fever. Grief turning memory strange. I have tried every clean answer. None of them fit the voice in the tunnel. None of them fit the hand at my window. None of them fit the way the deer came close to the walls as if they wanted the company of men more than the dark beyond us. And I still dream of the knocking. 3 slow taps. In the dream I'm young again, and the fire has gone low and frost is painting the edge of the glass. I know what waits outside before I hear it, and still some part of me hopes it will only be a stag. Only antlers on stone, only an old fear dressed in moonlight. Then the tapping comes, and I understand, as I understood then, that the world is not split into the things we know and the things we do not. There is a third kind, things we almost know, things close enough to where a shape our minds can touch, yet wrong enough to break us when we try. You may ask why I am telling it now. Age, perhaps, or shame, or the simple fact that secrets do not grow lighter when you carry them long enough. They grow roots. They work into your sleep. They change how you listen to wind at the door and how you look at dark water by the roadside. I have buried friends, buried dogs, buried years. I have sat through storms in safer houses than that lodge ever was. Still, on certain nights when the cold comes in, wet from the west, and the world smells of reeds and peat, I feel that old part of me wake and listen. I listen for 3 taps, and sometimes, though heaven help me, I think the Moor is still listening too. Because places remember. I believe that now. Stone remembers. Water remembers. Soft ground remembers best of all. It keeps the press of every hoof, every boot, every hand that ever begged for purchase there. Men vanish. Names go. Wood rots down. But the ground holds on. It takes what falls into it and says nothing. The Moor keeps its own. We used to laugh when we said that. We thought it meant weather and bog and foolish sheep. We were wrong. I was the only one who came back able to speak, and even then I did not speak plain. Not for years. I said animal. I said accident. I said I got turned around in the dark, but truth has a way of leaking through the cracks of a life. It comes out in what you avoid, in the roads you do not take, in the nights you sit up watching a window instead of sleeping. People see it. They may not name it, but they feel where the missing piece should be. So this is my piece. Not an answer. Just a telling. If there's mercy in it, it lies only here. Whatever lived out on Rannoch Moor that winter did not come east with me. Or, if it did, it stayed quiet, hidden under the noise and smoke and bright lamps of the wider world. Perhaps it belonged to that ground the way fog belongs to a lock. Perhaps it was old before our roads. Perhaps it was only one of those crooked things nature makes once in a long while, and then hides before anyone can fit it into a book. I do not know. I only know what I saw. I saw a thing stand at my window like a man and tap the glass with something that was not a hand and not a hoof. I saw it take a full-grown keeper over a wall, as if he weighed no more than a hair. I heard it wear our voices in the dark. I smelled its den under the earth, and I watched the land close around what it left behind until morning made liars of us all. There are folk who say every mystery wants solving. I was young enough once to believe that. Now I think some mysteries want only witness. They happen. They scar. They stay. You go on living around them the way water goes around a stone. The shape of your life changes, and after enough years you almost forget it was ever different. Almost. But not quite. Not on cold nights. Not when the wind comes from the west, and not when something brushes the wall outside, pauses by the glass, patient as old hunger, waiting to see if I remember. I remember. That is the worst part. I remember the beauty first, and then the fear. I remember how close those two things can stand together. And I remember that some doors hold, and some do not. So if you ever find yourself alone on a wide piece of ground with deer staring toward your fire, and the dogs refusing to go on and the air gone still in a way that does not feel natural, do not wait for proof. Do not wait for reason. Leave while the path is clear and the light is still with you. Leave before the knocking starts. Leave before the earth shows you what it has been keeping, because once the moor lifts the edge of its secret, it never lays it down gently again. I have had a lifetime to make peace with that night, and I have failed. Some things are too large for peace. Some things stay hungry. And some nights, when the house is quiet and the fire is low, I wake before the sound arrives, already cold, already knowing what waits on the other side of the glass. Then I lie very still and listen. And I pray that it keeps walking, because if it ever knocks again, I do not think I will mistake it for antlers. I think I will know at last that it has come to see whether I am ready to be taken back. And the truth is, after all these years, some part of me fears I never really left that moor at all. Some part of me is still there, under the pines, listening to something move in the dark. Some part of me still hears the old keeper telling me to run. Some part of me still hears the maul, and when the wind is right, I can almost hear the soft, wet drag of it circling below the floor, patient as winter, waiting for the boards to thin and the fire to die. So believe me, or do not. I have long since stopped asking for that. Belief changes nothing. The ground west of those old pines is still there. The black water still lies in its cuts. Deer still cross it in the mist. Snow still settles into its hollows. And under all of that, under root and peat and stone, there may still be a place where bones sink slowly and voices learn the shape of a man's mouth. I try not to think about that place. I fail more often than I care to admit. Because every life has one night that divides it in two. The night before. For me, it was the night something stood at my window and tapped 3 times. I have never slept the same since, and I do not believe the moor has forgotten me. I know I have not forgotten it. That is all I can give you. Only this. If you hear 3 slow taps at your glass in the middle of a windless night, do not look too quickly. Some things wait for that. Some things learn your face the instant you offer it. And once they know you, I do not think they ever really let go. The fire is low now. The room is cold. And outside, the dark still feels hungry.